The morning sun cast long shadows across the stone floors of Ashworth Castle as Lyra pulled her cloak tighter around her shoulders. At 23, she had grown used to walking these halls alone, listening to the whispers that followed her wherever she went. Still no suitors for Lord Ashworth's eldest. She heard a servant mutter to another as they passed. Poor girl, getting older by the day. Lyra kept walking, her chin held high even though each word stung like a blade. She had heard these whispers for years now. While other girls her age were planning weddings or tending to their own children, Lyra remained unwed, unwanted, and increasingly unwelcome in her own family home. Her father, Lord Benedict Ashworth, barely looked at her during the morning meal. His attention was focused entirely on Lyra's younger sister, Mira, who sat beside him glowing with happiness. Just 17, Mira had already secured an engagement to Duke Aldrich of Westmarch, a match that would bring great wealth and status to their family. The Duke's family will arrive next month for the official ceremony, Lord Ashworth announced, cutting into his meat with obvious satisfaction. This union will secure our family's future for generations. Lyra stabbed at her porridge, trying to ignore the way her father's eyes deliberately avoided her. She knew what he was thinking. Mira was the valuable daughter, the one who would bring honor to the Ashworth name. Lyra was simply the burden who consumed resources and gave nothing back. "What about Lyra, father?" Mira asked sweetly, though her voice carried a hint of mockery that only Lyra seemed to catch. "Surely we should find her a husband soon as well." Lord Ashworth's jaw tightened. "Your sister is particular about her choices. Perhaps she prefers to remain here, helping manage the household." The words hit Lyra like a physical blow. At 23, she was already being written off as a spinster, destined to become the unmarried aunt who would live on family charity for the rest of her life. The thought made her stomach turn. After breakfast, Lyra escaped to the castle's library, the one place where she felt truly at peace. Surrounded by books and scrolls, she could lose herself in stories of adventure and romance, imagining lives far different from her own. She was deep in reading about distant kingdoms when her cousin Helena burst through the heavy wooden doors. "Lyra! There you are," Helena gasped, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "You'll never guess what just happened," Lord Geoffrey's son asked, "Father, for my hand in marriage." Helena was only 19, 4 years younger than Lyra, but she would now be the third cousin to marry before her. Lyra forced a smile onto her face, though it felt like her heart was cracking. "That's wonderful news, Helena. Lord Geoffrey's family is very well respected." "I know. And the wedding will be in spring, just after the harvest festival." "Oh, Lyra. I'm so happy I could burst." Helena spun around the library like a child, her joy infectious despite Lyra's inner pain. As Helena chattered about wedding plans and dress designs, Lyra found herself wondering what was wrong with her. She wasn't ugly. People often commented on her auburn hair and green eyes. She could read and write better than most lords, could manage household accounts, and knew enough about politics to hold intelligent conversations. Yet year after year, she remained alone while younger women found love and security. The answer, she suspected, lay in her refusal to be meek and agreeable. Unlike Mira, who giggled at every man's joke, or Helena, who blushed prettily when complimented, Lyra spoke her mind. She questioned decisions, offered her own opinions, and refused to pretend ignorance to make men feel superior. In a world where women were expected to be decorative and silent, Lyra was neither. That evening, the castle prepared for the Autumn Harvest Festival, the biggest celebration of the year. Servants hung colorful banners from the walls and arranged tables laden with roasted meats, fresh bread, and barrels of ale. Musicians tuned their instruments while ladies adjusted their finest gowns. Lyra chose a simple green dress that complemented her eyes, though she knew it hardly mattered. She would spend the evening watching others dance while she sat alone, invisible among the celebration. The great hall filled with laughter and music as neighbors and nobles gathered to celebrate another successful harvest. Lyra positioned herself near a window, partially hidden behind a stone pillar where she could observe without being noticed. She watched as young couples spun across the dance floor, their faces glowing with happiness and possibility. Lord Geoffrey's son swept Helena into his arms for a romantic waltz, while Duke Aldrich charmed Mira with whispered words that made her blush and giggle. Even the servants seemed paired off, stealing moments together between their duties. All alone again, cousin? The sneering voice belonged to her cousin Robert, Lord Ashworth's nephew, who had always taken pleasure in Lyra's misery. He approached, with a goblet of wine in his hand and mockery in his eyes. By choice, Lyra replied coolly, though her hands trembled slightly as she gripped her own untouched cup. Robert laughed, a harsh sound that carried over the music. By choice? Oh, Lyra, even you can't believe that anymore. Face the truth. No man wants a woman who thinks she's cleverer than he is. You've priced yourself out of the marriage market with that sharp tongue of yours. His words struck deep, because they echoed her own fears. Perhaps I simply have standards, she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Standards? Robert's laughter grew louder, drawing attention from nearby guests. You mean delusions? Look around you, cousin. Every woman here has found her place except you. Even the baker's daughter is engaged to the blacksmith's son. But not our learned Lyra. Oh no. She's too good for any man who might actually want her. Heat rose in Lyra's cheeks as she realized others were listening to Robert's cruel words. She saw pity in some faces, amusement in others, but nowhere did she see respect or understanding. At least I won't settle for just anyone, she said, her voice carrying further than she intended. Settle? Robert's eyes gleamed with malicious pleasure. My dear cousin, at your age you'd be lucky if the village fool would have you. But please continue holding out for your fairy tale prince. I'm sure he'll arrive any day now. The surrounding guest chuckled at Robert's wit, and Lyra felt her composure finally crack. Without another word, she pushed past him and fled from the great hall, ignoring the whispers and stares that followed her retreat. The castle gardens offered blessed solitude after the noise and humiliation of the hall. Lyra found her favorite spot on a stone bench beneath an old oak tree, where moonlight filtered through the branches and created patterns of silver and shadow on the ground. Here, finally alone, she allowed the tears she had held back all evening to flow freely. The pain of years of rejection, dismissal, and loneliness poured out of her in great shaking sobs that seemed to come from the depths of her soul. No man has ever claimed me, she cried to the indifferent moon, her voice breaking with desperation. Not one has ever looked at me and seen something worth fighting for, worth choosing, worth loving. Am I so terrible? Am I so unworthy of affection? The questions hung in the cool night air, unanswered and seemingly unanswerable. Lyra had always prided herself on her independence, on not needing anyone else's approval to feel worthy, but in this moment, surrounded by the silence of the garden, she felt the crushing weight of her isolation. Is this my fate? She whispered, wiping tears from her cheeks with the back of her hand. To grow old and bitter, watching everyone else find happiness while I remain forever on the outside looking in? What's wrong with me that no one wants to stay? She thought about all the men who had briefly shown interest over the years, only to disappear when they realized she wouldn't play the part of the submissive, adoring wife. She remembered the conversations that ended abruptly when she expressed opinions about politics or literature, the suitors who stopped calling after she challenged their assumptions or corrected their mistakes. Maybe Robert is right, she said to herself, fresh tears starting to fall. Maybe I'm too proud, too difficult, too much trouble for any man to want to deal with. Maybe I should have learned to hold my tongue, to smile and nod and pretend to be less than I am. The thought made her feel sick, but it also felt like the truth she had been avoiding. In a world where women were expected to be ornaments rather than equals, perhaps her intelligence and spirit really were flaws rather than strengths. I just wanted someone to see me, she whispered into the darkness. Really see me, not just what they wanted me to be. I wanted someone to value my thoughts, to enjoy my conversation, to appreciate the person I actually am, rather than trying to change me into someone else. The garden remained silent, except for the gentle rustling of leaves in the night breeze. Lyra felt more alone than ever, convinced that her deepest fear was true, that she would never find someone who could love her as she was. "Am I destined to wither away, forgotten and unwanted?" she asked the uncaring stars. "Will I spend the rest of my life watching others find love while I remain forever unclaimed, forever alone?" Her voice echoed slightly off the garden walls, emphasizing the emptiness around her. For 23 years she had told herself that she was strong enough to stand alone, that she didn't need anyone else's validation to be complete. But sitting in the moonlight with tears on her cheeks, she finally admitted the truth she had hidden even. Lyra's breath caught in her throat as a tall figure emerged from the shadows beyond the garden wall. In the moonlight, she could make out the silhouette of a man unlike any she had ever seen. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, each step deliberate and silent. Dark leather armor covered his broad frame, and she caught the glint of weapons at his side. "Who are you?" she whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. Fear and curiosity warred within her as the stranger approached the low stone wall that separated the garden from the outer grounds. "Someone who heard a promise that needed making," he replied, his voice carrying an accent she couldn't place. It was deep and rough, like gravel mixed with honey. "My name is Cale." He stepped closer to the wall, and moonlight revealed more of his features. His face was angular and weathered, marked by a thin scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw. Dark hair fell to his shoulders, and his eyes seemed to hold depths of experience that spoke of battles fought and hardships endured. He appeared to be perhaps 30 years old, though something in his gaze suggested he had lived far more than his years should allow. "Cale," Lyra repeated, testing the unfamiliar name on her tongue. "You're not from around here." "No," he agreed, placing one gloved hand on the stone wall between them. "I'm from much farther away than you might imagine. But distance doesn't matter when you hear someone in genuine need." Lyra stood slowly, brushing tears from her cheeks and trying to compose herself. "You heard what I said?" "I heard a woman who has been told her worth depends on someone else's approval," Kyle said quietly. "I heard someone who believes she's unworthy of loyalty simply because others lack the wisdom to recognize her value." His words struck her like lightning. No one had ever spoken to her this way before, acknowledging her pain while simultaneously challenging the beliefs that caused it. "You don't even know me," she said, though without the sharpness she usually used to defend herself. Something about this stranger made her feel safer rather than threatened, despite his obviously dangerous appearance. "I know enough," Cale replied. "I know you're intelligent enough to question the world around you, brave enough to speak your mind despite the consequences, and strong enough to stand alone when others abandon you. Those are rare qualities in any person." Lyra felt fresh tears threatening, but these were different from the ones she had shed earlier. And yet they seemed to drive everyone away. "They drive away the wrong people," Cale corrected gently. "The right person would see those qualities as treasures, not burdens." For a long moment they simply looked at each other across the garden wall. Lyra found herself studying his face, noting the intelligence in his dark eyes and the way he held himself. With quiet confidence, there was something almost otherworldly about him, as if he existed slightly apart from the normal world she knew. "Why are you here?" she asked finally. "In our lands, I mean. You're clearly not from the kingdom of Valdris." A shadow passed across Cale's features. "I'm searching for something I lost long ago. My path brought me through your father's territory tonight, and I heard music from the castle. I was going to pass by, but then—" He gestured toward the garden where she sat. "Then you heard me having my breakdown," Lyra finished with a self-deprecating laugh. "I heard someone speaking truth in a world full of lies," he said firmly. "And I decided that perhaps what I was searching for could wait another night." The next morning brought chaos to Ashworth Castle when Lord Benedict discovered that a strange warrior had taken up residence in the abandoned tower that overlooked the eastern wall. The tower had been empty for years, considered uninhabitable, due to its crumbling stairs and drafty chambers, but somehow the stranger had made himself at home. "This is intolerable," Lord Benedict shouted, pacing back and forth in the great hall, while his guards stood nervously nearby. We know nothing about this man. He could be a spy, a thief, or worse. Lyra watched from the doorway as her father worked himself into a rage. She had barely slept the night before, replaying every word of her conversation with Cale, and wondering if she had imagined the entire encounter. "Send the guards to remove him immediately," Lord Benedict commanded his captain. "Use whatever force is necessary." "Father, wait," Lyra said, stepping into the hall. Every head turned toward her, and she felt the familiar weight of disapproval from her family members. "Lyra, this doesn't concern you," her father said dismissively. "Actually, it does," she replied, lifting her chin. "The stranger, Cale, he's here because of me." The hall fell silent except for the crackling of logs in the great fireplace. Lord Benedict's face turned an alarming shade of red. "What do? You mean because of you?" Before Lyra could answer, the heavy wooden doors of the hall swung open. Cale entered with the same quiet confidence he had shown in the garden, seemingly unbothered by the dozens of hostile stares directed his way. In the morning light, Lyra could see him more clearly. His dark leather armor was well maintained, but showed signs of heavy use, and the sword at his side was clearly a weapon meant for serious combat, rather than decoration. "Lord Ashworth," Cale said, offering a slight bow that managed to be respectful without being subservient. "I apologize for the intrusion. I should have requested permission before taking shelter in your tower." "You should have requested permission before setting foot on my lands," Lord Benedict snapped. "Who are you and what do you want?" "As I told your daughter, my name is Cale, and what I want is simple, to serve as her guardian." The statement caused an immediate uproar. Mira gasped dramatically, Lord Benedict sputtered in outrage, and several guards reached for their weapons. Only Lyra remained silent, staring at Cale with a mixture of amazement and confusion. "Guardian?" Lord Benedict's voice rose to nearly a shout. "By whose authority? What right do you have to make such a claim?" "By the right of someone who made a promise," Cale replied calmly. "Your daughter asked why no man had ever claimed her. I answered that I would guard her until the end. I intend to keep that promise." "This is madness," Mira declared, fanning herself dramatically. "Father, you can't possibly allow this stranger to simply declare himself Lyra's protector." "I don't need a protector," Lyra said quietly, though her heart was racing. "I can take care of myself." Cale turned to look at her directly. "I'm sure you can, but that doesn't mean you should have to." The simple statement silenced her objections. For so long she had prided herself on her independence, on not needing anyone. But hearing someone offer to stand beside her, not because she was weak, but because she deserved support, made something inside her chest flutter with hope. "What do you expect in return?" Lord Benedict demanded suspiciously. "Gold, land, a title. Men like you don't offer their services for free." "I expect nothing," Cale replied. "I ask only for permission to remain in the tower and the right to ensure your daughter's safety. In return, I offer my sword in service to your house should the need arise." Lord Benedict studied the stranger with calculating eyes. Lyra could practically see her father weighing the potential benefits against the risks. A skilled warrior in service to their house could be valuable, especially given the uncertain political climate in neighboring kingdoms. "You'll swear an oath of loyalty to House Ashworth?" Lord Benedict asked. "I'll swear an oath to protect Lyra. Ashworth with my life," Cale corrected. "My loyalty is to her, not to your house or your ambitions." The distinction was subtle but important, and Lyra caught it even if others didn't. Cale wasn't offering to become her father's tool. He was offering to become her guardian, answerable to her alone. "This is highly irregular," Lord Benedict muttered, but Lyra could see him wavering. "Father," she said quietly, "perhaps we should accept his offer. What harm could it do?" The truth was, she desperately wanted Cale to stay. For the first time in her life, someone had chosen her, not her father's wealth or her family's connections, but her specifically. The feeling was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. Lord Benedict looked around the hall, taking in the faces of his family and advisors. Most seemed skeptical but not entirely opposed. Finally, he sighed heavily. Very well. You may remain in the tower, but you'll follow the rules of this house. You'll cause no trouble, make no demands, and if I decide your presence is unwelcome, you'll leave immediately. Agreed, Cale said with another slight bow. And you, Lord Benedict pointed at Lyra, will not encourage any impropriety. This man is your guardian, nothing more. Lyra's cheeks burned, but she nodded. Of course, Father. As the crowd dispersed and normal castle life resumed, Lyra found herself alone with Kyle in the Great Hall. The morning sun streaming through the high windows revealed more details about her mysterious guardian. His armor was foreign in style, unlike anything worn by knights in Valdres. The leather was dyed a deep brown that was almost black, and she could see intricate toolwork and patterns she didn't recognize. Why? She asked simply. Kyle understood her question without elaboration. Because everyone deserves to have someone who will stand beside them. Because your worth isn't determined by whether others can see it. And because... He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. Because I know what it's like to be alone in the world. Over the following days, Cale settled into castle life with surprising ease. He was quiet and unobtrusive, appearing at meals only when invited and keeping to himself most. The attack came on a moonless night when thick clouds blocked even the faintest starlight. Lyra woke to the sound of breaking glass and muffled screams, echoing through the castle corridors. For a moment she lay frozen in her bed, hoping it was just a nightmare. Then she heard the clash of steel on steel, and knew that her worst fears were becoming reality. She threw on a robe and rushed to her window, peering down into the courtyard below. Dark figures moved like shadows between the buildings, and she could see the bodies of guards lying motionless on the cobblestones. These weren't common bandits. They moved too purposefully, too professionally. A soft knock on her door made her heart jump into her throat. Lyra, came Cale's low voice. It's me. Open the door, but stay away from the window. She rushed to unlock the heavy wooden door, and Cale slipped inside. In the darkness, she could see that he was fully armed and armored, his sword drawn and ready. Even in the dim light, she could tell something was different about him. Gone was the quiet guardian she had grown to know. This was a warrior preparing for battle. What's happening? She whispered. Assassins, he replied grimly, moving to the window to assess the situation outside. Professional killers, not random thieves. They're here for a specific purpose. To rob the castle? Cale turned to face her, and even in the darkness she could see the weight of truth in his expression. They're here for you, Lyra. The words hit her like a physical blow. Me? That's impossible. I'm nobody important. I have no enemies, no. You have more enemies than you know. Kyle interrupted gently. And you're far more important than anyone has told you. Before she could ask what he meant, shouts erupted from the corridor outside her room. Heavy boots thundered on stone floors, growing closer by the second. They found us, Cale said, pushing Lyra behind him as he positioned himself between her and the door. Whatever happens next, stay behind me and do exactly what I say. The door exploded inward as 3 men in dark clothing burst into the room. They moved with deadly precision, weapons gleaming in their hands. Lyra had never seen professional killers before, but she knew instinctively that these men were exactly that. What happened next would stay burned in her memory forever. Kyle moved like liquid shadow, faster than she would have thought possible. His sword seemed to dance in his hands as he engaged all 3 attackers simultaneously. The first assassin fell within seconds, Kyle's blade finding its mark with surgical precision. The second managed to land a glancing blow on Kyle's shoulder, before being dispatched with ruthless efficiency. The third assassin was more skilled, and for a terrifying moment, Lyra thought he might actually overcome her guardian. Steel rang against steel as they fought back and forth across her chamber, destroying furniture and sending tapestries crashing to the floor. But even as she watched in amazement, Lyra realized that Cale was holding back. He wasn't just fighting to win. He was fighting to protect her while simultaneously trying not to reveal the full extent of his abilities. When the final assassin fell, Cale stood breathing heavily, blood seeping from wounds on his shoulder and thigh. "Are you hurt?" he asked immediately, his concern for her taking priority over his own injuries. "I'm fine," she replied, though her voice shook. "But you're bleeding." "It's nothing serious," he said, though she could see the pain in his eyes. "We need to leave now. There will be more of them." "Leave? This is my home." "This is a trap," Cale corrected, moving to her wardrobe and pulling out traveling clothes. "Get dressed quickly. Bring only what you absolutely need." As Lyra changed clothes with trembling hands, her mind raced with questions. "Cale, you have to tell me what's happening. Who were those men? Why do they want to kill me?" Kyle was packing supplies into a leather satchel, his movements efficient despite his wounds. "They want to kill you because of who you are, because of what your bloodline represents." "My bloodline? I'm the daughter of a minor lord in a backwater kingdom. What could possibly be threatening about that?" Kyle stopped packing and looked at her directly. "Your mother wasn't just Lord Benedict's wife, Lyra. She was Princess Ilara of Drakmor." The words made no sense to her. "That's impossible. My mother died when I was born. Father told me she was a merchant's daughter from the eastern provinces." "Your father told you what he thought would keep you safe," Cale said gently. "The truth is far more complicated and far more dangerous." As they prepared to flee through the castle's secret passages, Cale began to reveal the truth that had been hidden from Lyra her entire life. Princess Ilara of Drakmor had fled her homeland 15 years earlier, when her brother-in-law, Duke Malachar, murdered the rightful king and claimed the throne for himself. "Your mother was pregnant when she escaped," Cale explained as they made their way through narrow stone corridors that Lyra hadn't known existed. "She sought refuge with Lord Benedict, who had been a friend of her family. They married to give legitimacy to her presence here and to give you a father who could protect you. But why would this Duke Malachar care about me? I was just a baby." "Because you represent a legitimate claim to the throne of Drakmor," Cale said, pausing to check around a corner before continuing. "As long as you live, his rule can be challenged." They emerged from the castle through a hidden exit in the wine cellars, finding themselves in the forest that bordered the Ashworth lands. In the distance, Lyra could see flames beginning to rise from parts of the castle. "My family," she gasped. "My father, Mira." "They'll be spared," Cale assured her. "Malachar's quarrel isn't with them. It's with you and with anyone who might support your claim to his throne." As they made camp in a secluded grove several miles from the castle, Lyra struggled to process everything she had learned. The man she had known as her father wasn't truly her father. Her real mother had been a princess. She was supposedly the rightful heir to a kingdom she had never seen. "And you?" she asked as she helped Cale tend to his wounds. "How do you fit into this story?" Cale was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of old pain. "My name is Cale Drakmor," he said. "I am the son of the murdered king. Malachar is my uncle, and Drakmor is my birthright as well as yours." Lyra's hand stilled on the bandage she was wrapping around his shoulder. "You're the rightful king." "I was the prince," he corrected. "Whether I'm the rightful king is a matter of perspective. What matters is that Malachar has spent 15 years hunting down anyone who might threaten his rule. He killed my parents, my younger sister, most of the noble families who supported us. I've been living in exile, gathering what allies I could find and waiting for the right moment to reclaim what was stolen." "And you found me by accident?" Kyle's expression grew softer. "Not by accident. I've been searching for Princess Ilara's daughter for 3 years. When I heard that Lord Benedict Ashworth had an unmarried daughter of the right age, I came to investigate. The revelation hit her like a cold wave. So when you found me in the garden that night, crying about how no man had ever claimed me, you already knew who I was." "I knew who your mother was," Kyle admitted. "But I didn't know who you were until I heard you speak. Your mother was known for her intelligence and her refusal to be silenced by men who thought they knew better. When I listened to you that night, I heard her spirit living on in you." Lyra pulled back from him, hurt and anger warring in her chest. So your promise to guard me until the end, that was just politics? A way to secure an ally for your cause? No, Kale said firmly, reaching out to catch her hand. It started as duty, I won't lie to you, but it became something else very quickly. What? It became the first time in 15 years that I cared about something more than revenge, he said quietly. You weren't supposed to be brilliant and funny and brave. You weren't supposed to make me remember what it felt like to hope for something beyond just survival. Despite her anger, Lyra felt her heart soften at his words. So what happens now? Do we ride off to Drakmor and try to overthrow your uncle? Do we gather an army and start a war? We survive, Kyle said simply. We stay alive long enough to figure out what kind of future we want to fight for. Because Malachar won't stop hunting us, and there are things about this situation that I haven't told you yet. What things? Kale looked uncomfortable. Your bloodline carries more than just political significance. The royal family of Drakmor has always had abilities that set them apart from ordinary people. Magic, some would call it, though it's more subtle than what you might read about in stories. Lyra stared at him. Magic? You're telling me I'm magical? I'm telling you that you might be able to do things that others can't. Healing, sensing danger, understanding the true nature of people around you. Your mother had such gifts, and they manifested more strongly when she was under stress or in danger. As if summoned by his words, Lyra suddenly felt a strange tingling in her hands where they rested on Kyle's bandaged shoulder. The sensation spread up her arms and seemed to center in her chest, warm and pulsing like a second heartbeat. Kyle, she whispered, staring down at her hands. Something's happening. The warm sensation grew stronger, and Lyra watched in amazement as the bandages around Kale's shoulder began to glow with a soft. The mountain passes that led to Drakmor were treacherous even in the best of times, but winter was approaching, and the paths grew more dangerous with each passing day. Lyra and Kale had been traveling for nearly a month, moving carefully through territories controlled by Duke Malachar's forces and avoiding the main roads where possible. During their journey, Lyra began to discover more about her magical abilities. At first, the healing power only worked when Kale was injured, but gradually she learned to sense when others were in pain or danger. In the small villages they passed through, she found herself drawn to sick children or wounded animals, her hands growing warm with that familiar golden glow. It's getting stronger, she observed one evening as they made camp beside a mountain stream. She had just finished healing a merchant's horse that had gone lame on the rocky trail, and the effort had left her both exhilarated and exhausted. Magic often grows stronger with practice, Kale explained, tending their small fire. Your mother could heal mortal wounds by the end of her life. She could also sense danger days before it arrived and read the true intentions in people's hearts. Could she fight? With magic, I mean? Kale's expression grew somber. She could defend herself and others, yes, but she preferred to use her gifts for healing and protection rather than harm. She always said that the power to destroy was easy. The power to create and preserve was much more difficult. As they traveled, they began to encounter others who had suffered under Duke Malachar's rule. Entire villages had been burned for suspected disloyalty. Families had been torn apart, with sons and fathers pressed into military service or simply disappearing in the night. The stories they heard made Lyra's heart ache and her anger burn brighter. How can one man cause so much suffering? She asked, after they spoke with a widow whose husband had been executed for refusing to surrender his grain stores to Malachar's tax collectors. Power corrupts, Kale replied simply. And absolute power, held by someone who was already cruel, creates monsters. But not everyone they met had given up hope. In a small mountain village called Raven's Hollow, they encountered their first real allies. The village elder, a weathered man named Master Aldwin, recognized something in Kale's bearing and asked to speak with him privately. You carry yourself like royalty, young man, the elder said, studying Kale's face in the firelight of the village. Oh, and there's something familiar about your features. Would you be kin to the old king by any chance? Kale exchanged a glance with Lyra before answering carefully. I might be. What would it matter to you if I were? Master Aldwin's eyes brightened with hope. Because this village has been waiting 15 years for the rightful heir to return. We've kept the old ways alive, passed down the stories of how things used to be when the kingdom was ruled by wisdom instead of fear. That night, by the light of the inn's great hearth, Master Aldwin shared the true history of Drakmor that had been forbidden since Malakar's rise to power. He told of the magical bloodline that had ruled justly for centuries, of the prosperity and peace that had flourished under their guidance. The people haven't forgotten, he assured them. In every village, in every town, there are those who remember the old ways and wait for their return. But they need someone to follow, someone to give them hope that change is possible. And if that someone fails? Lyra asked quietly. If we can't live up to their expectations, then at least they'll have tried, Master Aldwin replied, which is more than they've been able to do for 15 years. Word spread quietly through the network of villages and towns that still harbored loyalty to the old royal line. Within a week, people began arriving in Ravens Hollow. Former soldiers, displaced nobles, craftsmen whose businesses had been destroyed by Malakar's heavy taxation. They came seeking confirmation of the rumors that the lost prince and princess had returned. Lyra found the attention both thrilling and terrifying. These people looked at her with such hope in their eyes, such faith that she could somehow solve all their problems and restore their world to rights. The weight of their expectations felt heavier than any physical burden. I don't know if I can be what they need, she confided to Kale one evening as they walked through the village. People bowed respectfully as they passed, calling her Your Highness and Princess with reverence that made her uncomfortable. You don't have to be perfect, Kyle assured her. You just have to care about their well-being more than your own comfort. Everything else can be learned. You make it sound so simple. The concept is simple, he corrected. The execution is the difficult part. Among their new followers was a young woman named Captain Vera, who had once served in the Royal Guard before Malakar's coup. She was barely older than Lyra, but carried herself with the confidence of someone who had seen real combat. She became their military advisor, teaching both Lyra and Kale about tactics and strategy. Your Highnesses have the advantage of legitimacy, she explained during one of their planning sessions. But legitimacy alone won't win battles. We need to be smart about how we challenge Malakar's forces. There was also Brother Marcus, a priest, who had secretly maintained the old religious traditions that honored both divine power and the natural magic that flowed through certain bloodlines. He helped Lyra understand her abilities from a spiritual perspective, teaching her meditation techniques that strengthened her connection to the magical forces within her. Magic isn't just about power, he explained. It's about balance, about understanding your place in the larger pattern of existence. The more you learn to work with your gifts rather than simply using them, the stronger and more precise they will become. Under his guidance, Lyra discovered she could do more than heal physical wounds. She could sense the emotional pain in people around her and sometimes ease their suffering with nothing more than a gentle touch. She could also detect lies and deception, feeling them like a discordant note in music. It's like everyone has a song, she explained to Kale after successfully identifying a spy who had been sent to infiltrate their group. Most people's songs are harmonious, even if they're sad or angry. But when someone is being dishonest or has cruel intentions, their song becomes ugly and harsh. This ability proved invaluable as more people sought to join their cause. Not everyone who claimed loyalty to the old royal line was trustworthy, and Lyra's gift for reading people's true intentions helped them avoid several potential betrayals, but their growing following also attracted unwanted attention. Malakar's spies reported back about the increasing rebel activity in the mountain regions, and soon patrols of enemy soldiers began sweeping through the area. The first real test of their abilities came when a company of Malakar's soldiers surrounded Ravens Hollow, demanding that the villagers surrender the pretenders they were harboring. Master Aldwin sent word to Lyra and Kale, who were meeting with allies in the surrounding hills. We can't let them harm innocent people because of us, Lyra declared immediately. Agreed, Kale said. But we can't simply surrender either. Malakar won't be satisfied with just our deaths. He'll punish the entire village for harboring us. Captain Vera proposed a daring plan. They would use Lyra's healing abilities and Kale's combat skills, combined with their small but dedicated force of followers, to rescue the villagers and drive off the soldiers. It's risky, she warned. We'll be outnumbered 3-1. Then we'll have to be 3 times as smart, Lyra replied, feeling a surge of determination she hadn't known she possessed. The battle for Raven's Hollow became the stuff of legend in the years that followed. Lyra discovered that her magical abilities extended beyond healing. In moments of extreme need, she could create barriers of pure energy that deflected weapons and protected her allies. She could also enhance the strength and speed of friendly forces, turning ordinary villagers into formidable fighters. Kale fought like a man possessed, his sword seeming to be everywhere at once as he cut through enemy lines with deadly precision. Together, they created a combination that proved devastating to Malakar's forces. The enemy soldiers, expecting to face untrained rebels, found themselves confronting opponents who seemed to possess supernatural abilities. But victory came at a cost. Several villagers were killed in the fighting, and many more were wounded. As Lyra moved through the aftermath, using her healing powers to save as many as she could, she felt the true weight of leadership for the first time. These people died because of us, she said to Kale as they held vigil over the bodies of the fallen. If we hadn't come here, they would still be alive. If we don't succeed in our mission, many more will die, Kale replied gently. Sometimes, leadership means accepting responsibility for difficult choices. The alternative, letting Malakar continue his reign of terror unopposed, would result in far more suffering. The victory at Raven's Hollow sent shockwaves throughout Drakmor. Word spread that the lost prince and princess had not only returned, but possessed the magical abilities of the old royal bloodline. Villages that had remained neutral began declaring their support for the rightful heirs. Former soldiers came out of hiding to join their cause. But success also brought new challenges. Malakar responded to their growing strength by increasing his own military activities. He began targeting anyone suspected of supporting the rebellion, and reports reached them of entire communities being. The capital city of Drakmor had once been known as the Jewel of the Northern Kingdoms, with its white stone towers and gardens that bloomed year-round thanks to the magical influence of the royal bloodline. But 15 years under Duke Malakar's rule had transformed it into something darker. The towers were stained with soot from the forges that produced weapons of war, and the gardens had withered, replaced by training grounds for soldiers and execution platforms for those who dared to dissent. As Lyra and Kale approached the city with their army of loyal followers, she felt her heart break at the sight of what her ancestral home had become. This was the kingdom she was supposed to help rule, the people she was meant to serve and protect. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders like a mantle made of lead. It's not too late, Kyle said quietly, riding beside her as they surveyed the city from the hills above. We can rebuild what was destroyed. We can bring back the beauty and the peace. Can we? Lyra asked, watching smoke rise from the factory chimneys that had replaced the palace's elegant spires. Or are we just going to create more destruction? In the process of trying to reclaim it? Their army had grown during the final march to the capital. Entire garrisons had defected from Malakar's forces, bringing not only their weapons and training, but also detailed knowledge of the city's defenses. Former nobles who had been in hiding for 15 years emerged to pledge their loyalty to the rightful heirs. Most importantly, the common people of Drakmor had begun to rise up from within the city itself, creating chaos and confusion that would aid in the coming battle. Captain Vera had developed a comprehensive strategy that would minimize civilian casualties while maximizing their chances of success. The key is speed, she explained during their final planning session. Malakar's strength lies in his ability to coordinate large forces. If we can strike quickly and decisively at multiple points, we can prevent him from mounting an organized defense. Brother Marcus had spent weeks working with Lyra to prepare her for what he called the ultimate test of her magical abilities. You'll be facing Malakar's sorcerer, Master Grimwald, he warned. He spent 15 years studying dark magic and building his power. Your abilities are strong, but they're rooted in healing and protection. His are designed to destroy. Then, I'll have to be smarter than he is, Lyra replied with more confidence than she felt. The battle for Drakmor began at dawn on the first day of winter. As snow began to fall on the ancient stones of the capital, Lyra had insisted on leading the charge herself, despite the protests of her advisors. She rode through the city gates beside Kael, her hands glowing with golden light as she deflected arrows and protected their advancing forces. The fighting was fierce but relatively brief. Malakar's soldiers, demoralized by years of serving a cruel master and facing an enemy that seemed to possess supernatural power, began surrendering in large numbers. By midday, most of the city had fallen to the loyalist forces, but the real challenge lay ahead. Malakar had barricaded himself in the royal palace along with his most elite guards and his sorcerer. The palace itself had been transformed into a fortress, bristling with magical defenses that would require all of Lyra's power to overcome. "He's waiting for us," Kael observed as they stood before the palace gates. "He knows we have to come to him." "Then let's not keep him waiting," Lyra replied, though her heart was pounding with fear and anticipation. The throne room of Drakmor Palace had once been a place of beauty and justice, where petitioners could bring their concerns to rulers who cared about their well-being. Now it was a chamber of horrors, decorated with the weapons and armor of defeated enemies, the walls stained with the blood of those who had dared to oppose Malakar's rule. Duke Malakar himself sat on the ancient throne that had belonged to Lyra's true father, and she felt a surge of rage at the sight. He was a large man who had grown soft with years of comfortable tyranny, but his eyes still held the cunning intelligence that had allowed him to seize power and hold it for so long. Beside him stood Master Grimwald, the dark sorcerer whose magic had helped maintain Malakar's grip on the kingdom. He was tall and gaunt, with hollow cheeks and eyes that seemed to glow with unholy fire. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge, and Lyra could feel her magical senses recoiling from his presence. "So," Malakar said as Lyra and Kael entered the throne room with a small group of their most trusted allies, "the lost children have finally come home. How touching." "Uncle," Kael said coldly, his hand resting on his sword hilt. "Your reign of terror ends today." "Does it?" Malakar laughed, the sound echoing off the stone walls. "You think because you've gathered a rabble of malcontents and peasants that you can simply walk in here and claim what's mine? I've held this throne for 15 years. I've built this kingdom into a power that commands respect throughout the known world." "You've built it on fear and suffering," Lyra replied, stepping forward despite the waves of dark energy emanating from Master Grimwald. "That's not strength. That's weakness, disguised as power. Spoken like someone who has never had to make the hard choices that leadership requires," Malakar sneered. "You think ruling is about being loved, about making everyone happy? It's not. It's about being feared enough that people follow orders and strong enough to crush anyone who threatens the stability you've created. Is that what you call this?" Lyra gestured around the throne room with its gruesome decorations. "Stability? I call it reality," Malakar replied. "Something you'll learn about very quickly if you somehow manage to survive the next few minutes." The battle between the forces of light and darkness that followed would be remembered in songs and stories for centuries to come. Master Grimwald unleashed powers that shook the very foundations of the palace, calling forth shadows that took physical form, and spells that turned the air itself into weapons of destruction. But Lyra had learned much during her journey from unwanted daughter to rightful queen. Her magical abilities had grown not just in strength but in wisdom, guided by the understanding that true power came from love rather than fear, from the desire to protect rather than the need to dominate. She countered Grimwald's attacks with barriers of pure light that absorbed his dark energy and transformed it into healing power for her allies. When he sent shadow creatures to attack her friends, she created warriors of golden light that fought with equal ferocity, but without the cruel malice that drove his creations. The battle raged back and forth across the throne room, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. But gradually, Lyra began to realize that Grimwald's power, while impressive, was fundamentally limited by its source. Dark magic drew its strength from pain, hatred, and fear, emotions that, while powerful, were ultimately finite and self-consuming. Her magic, rooted in love and the desire to heal and protect, could draw upon an unlimited wellspring of power, as long as she remained true to her values. The more she focused on helping others rather than defeating her enemy, the stronger her abilities became. The turning point came when Master Grimwald, growing desperate as his powers began to wane, attempted to kill Cale with a spell designed to stop his heart. Lyra threw herself between them, taking the full force of the attack. For a moment it seemed as though the dark magic had succeeded. She collapsed to the marble floor, her face pale and her breathing shallow. But instead of dying, Lyra absorbed the dark energy and transformed it into something else entirely. She rose from the floor surrounded by light so brilliant that everyone in the room had to shield their eyes. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of centuries of righteous rulers who had come before her. "Your power is broken," she said to Master Grimwald, who was staring at her in shock and terror. "You draw your strength from darkness, but I am the light that conquers all shadows." With a gesture, she banished the sorcerer's remaining magic and left him standing powerless before the throne. Without his magical support, Duke Malakar's remaining guards quickly surrendered, recognizing that their cause was lost. Malakar himself remained defiant to the end. "You think you've won something here?" he snarled as Cale's soldiers moved to arrest him. "You think the people will love you just because you defeated me? They'll turn on you the moment things get difficult. They always do." "Maybe," Lyra replied, calmly. "But at least I'll give them the chance to choose their own path instead of forcing them to follow mine through fear." With Malakar defeated and his sorcerer stripped of power, the liberation of Drakmor was complete. The people of the capital poured into the streets, celebrating the end of 15 years of oppression. Church bells that had been silent for over a decade rang out across the city, and flowers began to bloom in the palace gardens as Lyra's magical presence restored life to places where it had long been absent. But victory brought new challenges that Lyra hadn't anticipated. Within days of Malakar's defeat, representatives from neighboring kingdoms began arriving at the palace, each with their own agenda for the newly liberated realm. "Princess Lyra," announced Lord Aldrich of the Eastern Kingdoms during a formal audience. "I come bearing a proposal of marriage from Prince Theodore, heir to the throne of Asto.